Chapter 1. Accident and Coma. The morning mist in the town always comes very gently. Emma stood in front of the curved French window of the old Victorian house, watching the morning light pass through the branches of the century-old walnut, casting tiny spots of light on the Persian carpet. She swallowed the last sip of latte, and the glass straw made a slight friction sound in the cup. This red brick house, which has been passed down for 3 generations, is her proudest property. The lace wedding dress left by her grandmother is also stored in the pointed attic. Lucy said she will bring her new boyfriend to dinner tonight. Paul hugged her waist from behind, the cedar scent of shaving water mixed with the aroma of coffee. Do you think it can last 3 months this time? When his chin rubbed her earlobe, Emma smelled a faint smell of whiskey. This habit has not changed after they have been together for 3 years, and they have to drink a small glass of single malt whiskey every morning to refresh themselves. Emma smiled and turned around, poking his slightly raised nose with her fingertips. Last time you bet Jason that we would break up in 2 weeks, what happened? Her engagement ring reflected rainbows in the morning light. It was a surprise that Paul took out from the mouth of a swan sculpture when they were rowing in Central Park last year. At that time, the boat was crossing the lake, startling a group of egrets. When he knelt on one knee, the boat shook violently and almost dropped the ring into the water. When the 7 o'clock bell rang in the town church, Emma was walking towards the attic with the freshly washed linen sheets. The 7th step of the wooden staircase suddenly made a harsh creaking sound. She was very familiar with this sound, and Paul should have repaired it 3 months ago. When her left foot stepped on the loose crossbar, she suddenly lost her balance. Emma remembered that she instinctively reached out to grab the handrail but only touched the air. The feeling of weightlessness surged like a black tide, and the sound of metal hangers falling in her ears was mixed with Paul's terrified shouts. The last thing that came into view was the swaying light spots of the crystal chandelier on the ceiling, like broken stars falling into the abyss. The smell of disinfectant first pierced the darkness. Emma's eyelashes trembled slightly, and she heard the regular ticking of the ECG monitor, like some kind of mechanical heartbeat. She wanted to open her eyes, but found that her eyelids were heavy as if they were pressed by lead. Her throat was so dry that it was smoking, but she didn't even have the strength to swallow. Her vital signs are stable. The strange male voice was professionally calm, but the probability of a patient in a deep coma waking up. Please, doctor, no matter how much it costs. It was the mother's choking voice and the father's heavy sigh. Emma wanted to raise her hand to touch them, but found that her limbs did not belong to her. Her consciousness was floating in chaos, sometimes shrouded in the fog brought by painkillers, and sometimes pulled back to reality by the conversation of nurses in the corridor. Once she clearly heard the nurse say, "The vegetative patient in Ward 302 should be turned over today." This word pierced her heart like an ice pick. She wanted to scream but couldn't make a sound. It wasn't until the moonlight that night that Emma was able to move her eyes. She saw Lucy's shadow reflected on the glass of the ward, arguing fiercely with Paul in the corridor. Lucy's red nails glowed coldly in the moonlight. It was Emma's birthday gift to her last year, limited edition red nail polish. The insurance company has already arranged it. Lucy's voice was sharper than ever before. As long as you follow the plan. Emma's pupils suddenly contracted. She heard Paul's leather shoes knocking out rapid drum beats on the tiles, gradually approaching the door of the ward. She quickly closed her eyes, but in the gap between her eyelashes she saw her boyfriend's hand pressing on the door handle, his knuckles whitening due to the force. In the long silence that followed, Emma began to count the number of times the dropper dripped. Tick 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 tick, every drop is like a countdown. She found that as long as she concentrated, she could make the little finger of her right hand tremble slightly. This discovery gave her a glimmer of hope in the darkness, just like a drowning person grabbing a lifeline. Every night after the nurse finished her rounds, she began to exercise silently. First move the little finger, then the thumb, then the wrist and the elbow. Sometimes when she was exhausted she would think of the afternoon when she and Lucy were sweating in the yoga studio. The girl who always said, "Hold on, downward dog can detoxify," was now planning how to make her sleep forever. On the morning of the 57th day, Emma was finally able to lift the entire palm by 5 centimeters. She lay there, feeling the warmth of the sun climbing up her eyelashes, and suddenly heard her mother whisper in her ear, "Today is your birthday and Mom brought you a rose." It was Emma's favorite Juliette rose, with a sweet fragrance and a hint of spiciness. She wanted to use this fragrance to fight the smell of disinfectant, but in her memory she saw Paul holding the same bouquet, knocking on her door in the rain and saying, "I was wrong, give me another chance." Outside the window came the singing of robins, and Emma silently made a wish in her heart. "When I can sit up, I must personally cut off the dream of this couple." What she didn't know was that at this moment in the underground parking lot of the hospital, Lucy was stuffing an envelope into Paul's hand, which contained forged property transfer documents. And 3 floors above their heads, Emma's nails were digging deep into her palms, leaving a little blood on the white sheets. Chapter 2: The Truth of Betrayal. Emma closed her eyes and pretended to be unconscious, but her heart was beating violently in her chest, as if it was about to break through her chest. She heard Paul's footsteps pause briefly at the door of the ward, and then the door handle turned, making a slight sound, and then the door was gently pushed open, and a cool breeze blew in through the crack of the door and brushed her cheek. "Is she still awake?" Paul asked in a low voice. There was no trace of the gentleness and concern in his deliberately soft tone. Although Emma closed her eyes, she could clearly imagine that he was frowning at the moment, his eyes wandering around her, full of temptation and anxiety. "It seems so," Lucy replied. Her footsteps quickly approached the bed, and Emma's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. She felt a chill coming towards her, as if someone cast a cold shadow over her head. The ward was quiet in an instant. Only the leaves outside the window were blown by the wind, making a rustling sound. This subtle sound was infinitely magnified in Emma's ears, and each sound was like a countdown of fate. "Are we really going to do this?" Paul's voice trembled slightly, revealing an unconcealable hesitation. Emma's heart suddenly clenched. The man who once vowed to protect her was now planning to hurt her. "It's come to this, can we turn back?" Lucy's tone was tough and resolute. "The insurance company's money will be in hand soon, and as long as she doesn't wake up, it won't be difficult to transfer the property. As long as it succeeds, we will have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of our lives." Emma almost couldn't help but open her eyes. Anger and shock surged in her heart like a surging tide. She has always regarded Paul as a lifelong partner and Lucy as a close friend, but now the conversation between the two is like a sharp blade, tearing her once beautiful fantasy to pieces. She never thought that the happy times spent together could not resist the temptation of money and interests. But what if she wakes up? Paul hesitated, with a hint of fear in his voice. "She won't wake up. Didn't the doctor say the probability is extremely small? Even if she wakes up, we have a way to shut her up." Lucy sneered, and the laughter was icy and piercing. "Don't forget, we have those photos and videos which are enough to ruin her reputation. At that time, even if she tells the truth, no one will believe it." Emma then remembered that when she was partying and traveling with them before, Lucy had taken a lot of private moments for fun. At that time she was unprepared and just thought it was a joke between friends. She never expected that these would become their handles to threaten her in the future. Thinking of this, Emma's nails pinched into her palm unconsciously. The pain kept her awake and every second was unbearable. "Okay." Paul sighed as if he had finally made up his mind, and his tone was full of greed for money and compromise with betrayal. In the next few minutes, the two whispered about the details, and their voices were very low, as if they were afraid of being heard by others. Emma suppressed her anger and pain, tried to calm her breathing and memorized their conversation word by word. She knew that she must not reveal the fact that she had woken up at this moment, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. When the footsteps gradually faded away and the door was gently closed again, Emma's tense nerves relaxed a little. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at the pale ceiling of the ward. Tears slid uncontrollably from the corners of her eyes and wet the pillow. It turned out that in the face of interests, years of feelings were so fragile and vulnerable. The vows and intimacy that had once been made became false illusions. But soon anger replaced sadness, and Emma secretly swore in her heart that she must make the two people who betrayed her pay a heavy price. She knew that the road to revenge was full of difficulties and obstacles, but in order to defend her dignity and rights, she was ready and would never back down even if she was covered in wounds. From that day on, Emma began to pay attention to every move outside the ward and never missed any opportunity to collect evidence. She waited silently in the darkness, her determination for revenge growing stronger with every heartbeat. She knew that the battle had just begun and she would never lose. Chapter 3. Secret Arrangement. After confirming that Lucy and Paul had left the ward, Emma's brain was like a fast-running machine, thinking about revenge plans all the time. She knew that rashly exposing the fact that she had woken up would only alert the enemy and put herself in a more dangerous situation. She had to quietly plan in secret, waiting for the best time to give the betrayers a fatal blow. In order not to arouse suspicion, Emma continued to pretend to be in a coma. During the day she lay quietly in the bed, listening to the nurses discussing her condition beside her, or her family members calling softly in her ears. Whenever someone approached, she controlled her breathing and expression, pretending to be unconscious. At night, when only the faint ticking sound of the instrument was left in the ward and the whole world fell asleep, Emma began her secret actions. She started practicing with the smallest movements, gently moving her fingers and toes under the quilt. At first these movements were very difficult and every movement seemed to be fighting against a strong resistance, but Emma did not give up. She practiced every day and as time went by her fingers and toes gradually became more flexible and her range of motion became larger. Then she began to try to bend her elbows and knees and slowly lift her arms and legs. Every successful move brought her one step closer to her goal of revenge. In addition to regaining her physical strength, Emma also kept an eye on Lucy and Paul's movements. She watched the time they entered and left the hospital through the window of the ward, and paid attention to their expressions and demeanor. Once she saw Lucy and Paul arguing fiercely in the hospital garden. Although she couldn't hear what they were saying, it could be seen from their angry gestures and expressions that there seemed to be a conflict between the two. This discovery gave Emma a glimmer of hope. She knew that the cracks within the enemy might become a breakthrough for her counterattack. In order to collect more evidence, Emma decided to use her mobile phone. She remembered that the mobile phone was in the cabinet in the ward, so late one night when the nurse finished her rounds and left, she carefully reached out and fumbled to open the cabinet. The moment her fingers touched the mobile phone she was excited. However, the sound of the phone turning on was particularly harsh in the quiet ward, and she held her breath nervously, fearing that she would be discovered. Fortunately, no one noticed the slight sound. Emma skillfully turned on the recording function and hid the phone under the pillow. The next day Lucy and Paul came to the ward again. They thought Emma was still unconscious, so they discussed the plan of property transfer unscrupulously. Emma listened quietly and her anger burned more and more. She secretly thanked herself for making preparations in advance and recording the evidence completely. In addition to recording, Emma also used the camera function of her mobile phone to record the suspicious behavior of Lucy and Paul. Once she saw Paul hurriedly leaving the ward with a document, so she took a picture of his back and part of the content on the document with her mobile phone. After careful identification, she found that it was a document about her property transfer, with Lucy and Paul's signatures on it. These evidences were like sharp blades, carefully collected by Emma, waiting to give the enemy a fatal blow at a critical moment. While recovering and collecting evidence, Emma was also thinking about how to fight back cleverly. She knew that Lucy and Paul were both cunning people, and simply exposing their crimes was not enough to make them receive the punishment they deserved. She needed to make a careful plan to strike them from all sides and make them pay a heavy price for what they did. Emma began to analyze the character weaknesses of Lucy and Paul. She knew that Lucy cared a lot about her reputation and always showed herself to be kind and generous, while Paul had a strong desire for money and would do anything for money. So Emma decided to start with these two aspects and develop a counterattack strategy. For Lucy, Emma planned to make her betrayal public and make her the object of everyone's scorn. She planned to contact the media, hand them the evidence she collected, and ruin Lucy's reputation through the pressure of public opinion. As for Paul, Emma decided to give him a heavy blow financially. She would use the power of lawyers to freeze the property they transferred and make Paul empty-handed. In order to ensure the smooth implementation of the plan, Emma also needed a reliable helper. She thought of her college classmate Tom, who was an excellent lawyer, honest and trustworthy. So Emma called Tom late one night. After the call was connected, Emma confided her experience to Tom and told him the evidence she had collected one by one. After listening, Tom was very angry about Lucy and Paul's behavior, and he agreed to help Emma without hesitation. Under Tom's advice, Emma began to organize the evidence, classifying the recordings, photos and documents according to chronological order and importance. At the same time, Tom was also actively preparing relevant legal documents for subsequent litigation. They also made a detailed timetable to ensure that every step could be carried out in an orderly manner. Days passed, Emma's body gradually recovered, and the evidence became more and more sufficient. She knew that the time for revenge was coming, and she was fully prepared to make Lucy and Paul pay a painful price for their betrayal. Chapter 4. Sudden Awakening. The sun shone through the mottled leaves, casting patches of light and shadow on the floor of the hospital ward. Emma lay on the bed with her eyes closed, seemingly still in a coma, but her heart was like a volcano about to erupt, hot and determined. After this period of secret preparation, she felt that the time for counterattack had gradually matured, and it was time to let everything surface. In the morning, the first ray of sunlight passed through the window on time and fell on Emma's face. She moved her eyelids slightly, and her eyelashes trembled gently, as if reconnecting with her body that had been sleeping for a long time. Then she slowly opened her eyes with a trace of confusion when she just woke up, but it was soon replaced by sobriety and determination. "Nurse! Nurse!" Emma shouted in a weak but clear voice. Although the voice was not loud, it was particularly loud in the quiet ward. The nurse who was busy at the nurse's station heard the shouting, hurriedly put down the documents in her hand and ran towards Emma's ward. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" the nurse asked while running, her face full of concern. I'm awake," Emma said softly. Her voice was still a little hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken for a long time. The nurse looked at Emma's awake appearance, her eyes full of surprise and joy. "Great. You finally woke up. I'll call the doctor now." After that, the nurse turned around and hurried out of the ward. After a while, the doctor rushed over with a group of nurses and instruments. They surrounded Emma's bed and conducted a series of detailed examinations on her, asking Emma how she felt while checking. Emma answered one by one. Although she was still very weak, she tried to make herself look more energetic. "You have recovered very well, it's simply a miracle," the doctor said to Emma with a smile, his eyes full of relief. "As long as you take good care of yourself, you will be discharged soon." Emma nodded slightly with a faint smile on her lips. "Thank you, doctor, thank you." The news spread quickly, and Emma's family rushed to the hospital as soon as they learned that she had woken up. The mother held Emma's hand tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. "My child, you finally woke up, you scared us." The father stood aside, his eyes slightly red, just patting Emma's shoulders, saying, "It's good to wake up, it's good to wake up." Lucy and Paul also rushed to the hospital after learning the news that Emma woke up. They stood at the door of the ward, pretending to be surprised and concerned, but their eyes revealed a hint of nervousness and uneasiness. "Emma, you finally woke up." Lucy walked quickly to the bed and said excitedly with a stiff smile on her face, "Do you know how worried we are about you?" "Yes, you made us worry to death." Paul also echoed, but his eyes were a little evasive and he didn't dare to look Emma in the eye. Emma looked at them, her heart was full of complex emotions, anger, disgust, but more of a determination for revenge. She smiled slightly and pretended to be weak and said, "Thank you for your concern. I seem to have had a very long dream." Lucy and Paul looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that Emma really didn't know anything. "That's good, you'll be fine when you wake up," Paul said with a hint of pretended ease in his tone. Emma nodded gently, then turned to look at her family. "I'm a little tired and want to rest for a while." The family looked at her distressfully, and after asking her to have a good rest, they left the ward one after another. Lucy and Paul couldn't stay any longer, so they had to leave. The moment they left the ward, Emma's eyes instantly became cold. Looking at their backs, she thought to herself, "The good show has just begun." In the next few days, Emma continued to improve her revenge plan while recuperating according to the doctor's instructions. She knew that Lucy and Paul would not give up so easily, and they would definitely have follow-up actions, and she must always be vigilant. Sure enough, a few days later Lucy came to the hospital again. She held a bouquet of flowers in her hand with a friendly smile on her face, and began to ask about her health after entering the ward. "Emma, how do you feel? This bouquet of flowers is for you, I hope you can get better soon." Lucy put the flowers on the bedside and said with a smile, "Thank you, I feel much better." Emma responded lightly, but her eyes were always fixed on Lucy, trying to find flaws from her expression and movements. The two chatted about family matters for a while, and Lucy's topic gradually turned to Emma's property. You have been in a coma for so long and many things need to be reorganized. Is there anything you need my help with your property? Lucy asked casually. Emma sneered in her heart, but her face remained calm. Not for the time being. I have contacted a lawyer and he will help me deal with everything. Hearing Emma mention the lawyer, Lucy's eyes flashed a trace of panic, but soon returned to normal. Oh, so it's good to have a lawyer to help, Lucy said with a smile. Then if you need anything you must tell me. Okay, thank you, Emma said with a slight smile on her lips. Lucy sat for a while and then found an excuse to leave the ward. Looking at her back as she left, Emma knew that her counterattack had made them feel uneasy, and this was just the beginning. As Emma's body gradually recovered, she communicated with lawyer Tom more and more frequently. They carefully studied each piece of evidence and developed a detailed litigation plan. At the same time, Emma also contacted reporters from several media outlets, revealed to them the betrayal of Lucy and Paul and provided some evidence. The reporters were very interested in this news and said they would conduct in-depth investigations and reports. During this time in the hospital, Emma was a weak patient who had just woken up on the surface. She cooperated with the doctor's treatment every day, chatted with family and friends and behaved very calmly. But under this calm appearance she was quietly laying a big net of revenge, leading Lucy and Paul into it step by step. Finally, on the day Emma was discharged from the hospital, all preparations were ready. She walked out of the hospital gate and took a deep breath of fresh air. The sun shone on her face, making her look full of strength. She raised her head, looked at the sky and said silently in her heart, "Lucy, Paul, your good days are over." Chapter 5. The counterattack begins. Emma was discharged from the hospital and returned home, but the familiar environment made her feel extremely unfamiliar. The once warm home was now covered with a haze because of Lucy and Paul's betrayal. But she had no time to indulge in sadness and anger. The flame of revenge burned in her heart, driving her to take action immediately. As soon as she entered the house, Emma went straight to the study. She sat in front of the familiar desk, turned on the computer and carefully sorted out the evidence collected during this period, sorting and storing recordings, photos, documents, etc. to ensure that each piece of evidence can play a role at the critical moment. With every click of the mouse, her eyes became more determined, and these were her weapons for revenge. After sorting out the evidence, Emma called lawyer Tom. "Tom, I'm discharged from the hospital and the evidence is ready. When do we start?" Emma's voice was calm and decisive without a trace of hesitation. "Anytime. I have drafted the lawsuit documents here. As long as you are sure, we can submit it to the court and apply to freeze the property they are transferring." Tom's answer was equally straightforward. "Okay, then do it as soon as possible. I don't want them to get away with it any longer." Emma held the phone tightly as if she could grasp the hope of revenge in this way. After hanging up the phone, Emma contacted the media reporter who had communicated with her before. "Hello, I'm Emma. Now we can start reporting what I told you before. I have more evidence in my hands, enough to expose their ugly behavior." Emma sent some of the evidence she had sorted out to the reporter by email and explained the details of what happened. "Thank you so much for your trust. We will definitely investigate in depth and make the truth public." The reporter's voice revealed excitement and a sense of justice. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner as planned. Emma knew that every step forward was crucial, and she had to be careful and not make any mistakes. A few days later, the court accepted Emma's lawsuit application and officially froze the property that Lucy and Paul were transferring. When they learned the news, they were all panicked. Paul frantically called Emma's phone and wanted to question her, but Emma directly blocked his number. Lucy tried to find out Emma's next plan through various connections, but to no avail. At the same time, the media began to report on Emma's betrayal. Once the news was released, it immediately caused an uproar. The public condemned Lucy and Paul's behavior, and their social media accounts were drowned in scolding from netizens. Those who had been in contact with them also distanced themselves from them, fearing that they would be implicated in this matter. Lucy and Paul tried to defend themselves in front of the public, claiming that it was all a misunderstanding and that Emma was deliberately framing them. But the evidence provided by Emma was ironclad, and their defense seemed pale and powerless. On the contrary, every rebuttal made the public more angry, and the pressure of public opinion was like a mountain which made them breathless. In this counterattack, Emma also cleverly took advantage of the contradiction between Lucy and Paul. She deliberately revealed some false information, making them mistakenly believe that the other party had betrayed them at a critical moment. The two began to blame each other and quarreled, and their relationship broke down completely. This made them more flustered and powerless when dealing with Emma's counterattack. As public opinion continued to ferment, Emma's story attracted more and more attention. Some people who had suffered similar betrayals also stood up to share their experiences and support Emma. This made Emma feel unprecedented strength, and she knew that she was not fighting alone. In the process, Emma did not forget to protect herself and her family. She strengthened the security measures at home to prevent Lucy and Paul from taking extreme actions. At the same time, she also comforted her family and told them not to worry, everything would be fine. As time went on, Emma's counterattack achieved initial results. Lucy and Paul not only lost the opportunity to transfer property, but also fell into the whirlpool of public opinion and lost their reputation. But Emma knew that this was not enough. She wanted them to pay a heavier price for their actions and accept legal sanctions. Next, Emma and Tom began to prepare for the upcoming court trial. They carefully studied every legal clause, analyzed possible situations, and developed response strategies. Emma also actively cooperated with lawyers to provide more details and evidence to ensure that they could win in court. In the days waiting for the trial, Emma was not idle. She re-examined her life and thought about the direction of the future. Although this experience brought her great harm, it also made her stronger and more mature. She decided to restart her life after the revenge was successful and pursue her true happiness. Finally, the day of the court trial came. Emma walked into the court with her head held high in a capable professional suit. Her eyes were firm and confident, as if she was announcing to the world, "Justice will be served." Lucy and Paul sat in the dock with haggard faces, their eyes full of fear and despair. They may have realized that their actions will soon face severe punishment. Chapter 6. Victory in the Court. In the court, the atmosphere was solemn and depressing, and the air was filled with tension. The wooden tables and chairs were neatly arranged, and the sunlight shone through the tall windows, forming bright beams of light, but it could not dispel the haze in people's hearts. Emma, dressed in a simple and capable black suit, sat upright in the plaintiff's seat, with a straight posture and a firm look in her eyes. Beside her, lawyer Tom was methodically sorting out various documents. Those documents carried the evidence they had collected for months and were powerful weapons in this battle for justice. On the other hand, Lucy and Paul lowered their heads in the dock, looking listless. Lucy's fingers twisted together uneasily, her nails deeply embedded in her palms, leaving pale marks. Paul kept wiping the cold sweat from his forehead with his hands. Although the temperature in the courtroom was not high, he felt like he was in a furnace. They knew that today's trial would determine their fate, and what they faced was Emma's ironclad accusation. The judge, dressed in a solemn black robe, sat upright in the bench, his eyes sweeping across the court. As the gavel fell heavily, the crisp sound echoed in the courtroom and the trial officially began. "Please ask the plaintiff to state the lawsuit request and factual basis." The judge's voice was steady and powerful. Emma took a deep breath, stood up, and spoke clearly and firmly. "Your Honor, a few months ago I was in a coma. During my coma, Lucy, who I regarded as my best friend, and Paul, my boyfriend of many years, betrayed me. They tried to transfer my property and planned to destroy my reputation, just to satisfy their greed and selfishness." As she spoke, a trace of anger flashed in Emma's eyes, but she quickly controlled her emotions and continued. "While I pretended to be in a coma, I collected a lot of evidence to prove their crimes." Then lawyer Tom presented the evidence one by one. Clear recordings recorded the conversations between Lucy and Paul when they were planning the conspiracy. Their voices echoed in the courtroom, and every word was like a sharp blade, stabbing them. Photos and documents recorded in detail the operation process of their property transfer and the various means of trying to discredit Emma's reputation. These evidences are like iron locks, locking Lucy and Paul tightly, making them unable to deny. Lucy and Paul's lawyers seemed a little flustered at this moment. They tried to find loopholes in the evidence and refute it. These evidences may have been edited and forged and cannot be used as the basis for a verdict. The defendant's lawyer stood up and said loudly, trying to save the situation. Tom was well prepared. He responded slowly, "Every piece of evidence we provide has been identified by a professional organization and has legal effect. Moreover, we have a complete chain of evidence, which is sufficient to corroborate each other and prove the defendant's infringement and fraud." As he said, he presented the identification report of the professional organization. The clear official seal and professional analysis on the report made the defendant's lawyer speechless. The court debate entered a white-hot stage and both sides went back and forth, neither giving in. Emma remained calm throughout. With her clear memory of the facts and her firm belief, she responded to every question from the defendant. Lucy and Paul gradually lost their confidence in the face of evidence and law, and their defense became increasingly pale and powerless. "Your Honor, we request to summon a witness," Tom said. The witness was a friend of Emma, who had witnessed some suspicious behaviors of Lucy and Paul. The witness walked up to the witness stand, nervous but firm in his tone, telling everything he had seen. His testimony further enriched Emma's chain of evidence and made Lucy and Paul's crimes clearer. After a long trial, the judge began to make the final ruling after listening to the statements and debates of both parties. The court was silent and everyone held their breath, waiting for the final verdict. After trial, this court found that the defendants Lucy and Paul committed infringement and fraud during the plaintiff Emma's coma, attempting to illegally transfer the plaintiff's property and damage her reputation. The evidence is conclusive and the facts are clear. According to relevant legal provisions, the verdict is as follows. The defendants Lucy and Paul must immediately return the plaintiff Emma's transferred property and pay corresponding compensation. At the same time, the defendants Lucy and Paul shall be subject to corresponding legal penalties. The judge's voice echoed in the courtroom, and every word fell like a heavy hammer, announcing Emma's victory. Emma's eyes were slightly moist when she heard the verdict, but she tried to control her emotions, and a relieved smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She had waited too long for this moment. She had made countless efforts and hardships for this day. Now justice has finally been served. After hearing the verdict, Lucy and Paul sat slumped in the dock, their eyes empty as if they had lost all their strength. They knew that their greed and betrayal had cost them a heavy price. The good life they once had was gone. What awaited them would be severe punishment from the law and scorn from society. Walking out of the court, the sun shone on Emma's face. She took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling the joy of freedom and victory. Although the road to revenge was full of hardships, she never gave up. Now she can finally let go of the past and start her life again. She looked back at the court, silently bid farewell to this painful experience in her heart, and then took firm steps towards a new journey of life. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. Emma was already fully committed to the journey of regaining control of her life before the warmth of her victory in court faded away. The news of her victory was like a spring breeze, blowing away the haze that had shrouded her life, allowing her to finally breathe the air of freedom and hope. Back home, Emma looked at everything familiar, feeling mixed emotions. The painful memories of being betrayed were always with her, but she was determined to completely dispel these hazes and make her home full of warmth and vitality again. She first set about sorting out the property affairs that were messed up by Lucy and Paul. She carefully checked every account with lawyer Tom to ensure that every penny of her property was returned to her. This process was tedious and time-consuming, and she had to communicate and confirm with banks and financial institutions repeatedly, but Emma had no complaints. Every time she solved a problem, she felt that she was one step closer to true freedom. After dealing with the property, Emma turned her attention to her career. Her career had stagnated due to an accident and subsequent twists and turns. But her love for design had never been extinguished, but became more and more intense in the hardships. She was determined to pick up her paintbrush again and open her own design studio. From finding a suitable studio location to selecting office furniture and recruiting employees, Emma did every step herself. She traveled through the streets and alleys of the city, comparing the pros and cons of different locations, carefully selecting furniture in the furniture market, just to create a comfortable and creative working environment. When interviewing each job seeker, she carefully considered the other party's professional ability and teamwork spirit. The days of preparing for the studio were busy and fulfilling, and Emma was often busy until late at night. Sometimes she would be so tired that she slumped in a chair, but when she thought of the beautiful blueprint for the future, she was full of motivation. Finally, the studio officially opened. On the opening day, the sun was particularly bright, shining on the brand new sign. Emma stood at the door watching the customers and employees coming in and out, and her heart was full of a sense of accomplishment. In the early days of the studio, it was not easy to develop business, but Emma gradually won the recognition and love of customers with her solid professional skills and unique design concepts. Every time she completed a design project and received satisfactory feedback from customers, Emma felt that all her efforts were worth it. As time went by, Emma's career development got better and better. Her works began to emerge in the industry, won some important design awards, and the studio's reputation became higher and higher, attracting more high-quality customers. Emma led the team to constantly challenge themselves, try new design styles and concepts, and move forward steadily in the design field. In terms of emotions, Emma was a little afraid of love at first. The betrayal in the past left a wound deep in her heart that was difficult to heal, and she was afraid of being hurt again. But life is always full of surprises. By chance she met Jack. It was at an art exhibition. Emma was deeply attracted by a painting and Jack happened to be standing next to it, and the two had a heated discussion about the painting. From art to life, they found that they had many common interests and topics, and the communication was very pleasant. When they parted, Jack sincerely asked Emma for her contact information, and Emma hesitated for a moment, but still gave it to him. In the days that followed, Jack often asked Emma to meet, and they went to the movies, drank coffee and strolled in the park together. Jack's sincerity and kindness gradually touched Emma. Every act of care and every caring word of his were like warm sunshine, slowly melting the ice in Emma's heart. In front of Jack, Emma could let go of all her defenses and be the most authentic herself. The relationship between the two gradually warmed up, and Jack became an important part of Emma's life. They experienced the joys and sorrows of life together, supporting and encouraging each other. Jack understood Emma's past pain and never forced her to do anything. He just stayed by her side silently and gave her enough sense of security. Emma also slowly learned to trust others again and embrace the beauty of love again. In addition to career and love, Emma also cherished the people around her who really cared about her. Her relationship with her family became closer, and she often took time to accompany her parents and spend warm time with them. She also reconnected with some friends who had been alienated because of previous things, and shared her experiences and feelings with them. With the support and encouragement of her friends, Emma became more cheerful and confident. Recalling those dark days, Emma was filled with emotion. She gradually grew from a betrayed and desperate person to a strong, independent and confident woman. This experience made her deeply realize the complexity of human nature, but also made her cherish the beauty of life more. She understands that it is inevitable to encounter setbacks and hurts in life, but as long as you maintain a firm belief and a positive attitude, you will be able to overcome difficulties and welcome a new dawn. Today, Emma stands at a new starting point in her life, with a beautiful vision for the future, bravely moving forward and opening a new chapter of her life.